Hello everybody, Contrarian Dude here, and my apologies for not making videos for a little while. I've been busier than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest, so hopefully you're going to get back into it a little bit. And I thought I'd start with this one. So some interesting stuff on the Julian Assange front. For those of you who don't recall, Julian Assange was the creator of a website called WikiLeaks, and it was the first site, certainly the first site that went big, which allowed whistleblowers to securely pass on information, documents, etc., in such a way that they could be anonymous. So we know that governments unfortunately now have the habit of, rather than protecting whistleblowers, they actually go out and attack whistleblowers, sending a message that if you report on any kind of government corruption, any kind of untoward lies, anything the government does, if you whistleblow on us, we will prosecute you, we will make you miserable, to the very best of our ability, we'll destroy your lives. And so WikiLeaks saw that abuse in place. WikiLeaks, Julian Assange saw that, produced WikiLeaks, and now whistleblowers had an opportunity to release documents to journalists, and those journalists could choose to do what they want with that information. If they thought it was particularly sensitive and put people's lives in danger, then those journalists could choose not to pass it on to the public. But what happened was journalists had access to that information, and then no one knew who the whistleblower was, where that information came from, and so people could pass on that information, their evidence, completely anonymously and without trace. And so it released a flood of things. It's because of WikiLeaks we have things like we know what the Trans-Pacific Pact was in, even though it wasn't released. You have to vote on it before you can read it. And nope, thanks to WikiLeaks, people could read it beforehand and find out what the hell they're planning to do with this. And in addition to lots more things. So that's Julian Assange. That's WikiLeaks. And so a little bit of history here. The US government has been after Julian Assange for that. Just again, he's a whistleblower. He's facilitating whistleblowers. He's embarrassing them. He's showing their crimes to the world. And even when you look at the backlash with people looking at Trump and Bernie Sanders going outside of the establishment, this revolt, this what's going on now with people really understanding just how evil and vile government is and can be. WikiLeaks is a big part of that. That was, that's over 10 years ago, where they really, maybe not quite that, but close to that, where they really kind of helped wake people up to wow, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and I shouldn't be that mindless fool who just trusts my government no matter what. They need to be held accountable, and they need to, they need to have information out in the daylight so we can keep them accountable. And so, that's the whole spectrum of things. That's what's going on. There was some basically trumped up charges about Julian Assange being a rapist in Sweden. And that was it's pretty well acknowledged now that the US government put pressure on Sweden to do that because they didn't have any way to prosecute him. It would be against the First Amendment in the United States. So the US government didn't have an opportunity to harass this journalist directly, so they encouraged the Swedish government to trump up these charges. And the UK government got on board, and they basically put him under quarantine, locked him up. He had to wear an ankle bracelet for about 2 years, and he was on home detention while they figured out if there was any evidence against him or if they could make any of these charges stick. At some point, Julian Assange just got lucky. I don't know if he planned it. Of course he planned it. I don't know exactly how or when, but he realized that all these governments are against him, and he was looking for a friendly government to protect him against the obvious abuses of the US and UK and Swedish governments. So he took the ankle bracelet off and basically ran away to the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been for 3.5 years. He's been in this one building protected by the Ecuadorian government on their, because an embassy is effectively Ecuadorian ground. And so he's been there, he's been trapped in that house 5.5 years. He's been denied access to his family, his children, his friends, just restricted movement. And that's where we stand today. And what happened is a few days ago, the United Nations in a High Court of Appeals, it's not called exactly that, pardon my lack of accuracy on whatever the name of the court is, but I think it's called the Commission on Human Rights, actually, that's what it's called, they came out, and after a 14-month trial, Julian Assange won. And the court has said that this is just complete abuse of power. There's no evidence against Julian Assange for any of these things. And not only should he be set free immediately, but he's actually entitled compensation for false imprisonment. So Julian Assange just made a speech about that. I'm going to kick over to that now, so a small portion of that speech, so you can see exactly what's going on in his words.
Last night issued a statement stating that the determination is legally binding.
Yes. Yes.
There have been comments from Philip Hammond, the Foreign Minister of this country, today, saying this changes nothing. Philip Hammond, as an individual, I think he's a perfectly nice person, but we must understand that those comments are merely rhetoric. There is no argument in this changes nothing. It is not stating that the UK will pull out of the working group in its determinations, or the Human Rights Council, or even that it refuses to recognise the result. The fact is, the UK and Sweden accepted to be parties to a 16-month process, 16 months of litigation before the working group on arbitrary detention. I made submissions. The UK responded in the process to those submissions. Sweden responded to those submissions formally as a party to the proceedings. They lost.
Yes.
UK lost. Sweden lost. It lost at the highest level. It then had an opportunity to appeal. UK did not appeal. Sweden did not appeal. That opportunity was 2 weeks long and just ended today. Today is the day where there can be no appeal. No appeal was filed. Why was no appeal filed? The UK and Sweden have had this judgment for the past 2 weeks. I and the public received it today. They did not file an appeal in that 2-week period. Why? Because they knew they would lose. Because there are no grounds for appeal, because the law is well established and documented in this comprehensive, binding judgment by the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention.
So, I mean, there you have it, a little bit of a catch up on what's going on. And in typical government style, you know, if we break the law, obviously there's just, you broke the law, you live in a society, you have to follow the law. When governments break the law and harass individuals and it's inconvenient for them to say, to apologize, to make amends, to just stop making their mistake, then they just throw a tantrum. It's like a kid kicking the board off the table when they start losing. It's like, you know, in a United Nations court, one where, you know, things are heavily stacked in favor of governments, especially, you know, the major political powers like the USA and UK, etc. And in that environment where things are heavily stacked in their favor, they lost. They lost cold. They agreed to be party of this court case. They lost, didn't go their way, and throw a tantrum, kick the board off the table, and no, doesn't change anything. We're still going to pursue him. It's just an outrageous abuse of power. Whether you like Julian Assange, whether you like WikiLeaks, whether you like any component of this story, you have to come out and speak about this, talk about this, and say this is a ridiculous abuse of power. You can't have a group of people who are accountable to no one ever at any time. If, you know, this court's ruling is against them, they have to obey the law the same way we have to obey all the laws. That's just how it works. And that appeals process has taken place. The government lost, and Julian Assange should be free, and he's not. And I'd encourage you to share this video and tweet about it, Facebook it, do whatever you got to do. But really, this kind of abuse of government really has to stop. And I think that'll be enough for me today. I'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.